Welcome to Venice Views. I'm Pam Johnson, Marketing and Communications Officer for the City of Venice. Today we're going to explore what it was like to grow up here in Venice and how it was living here a few years back before Venice got to be so well known by everyone in this country. And with me to help explore that time is Jim Sager. Jim, thanks for being on Venice Views.
You're quite welcome.
And we are here in your beautiful 1926
That's right.
home.
That's what I'm told.
Okay, so this is just a perfect place to have this conversation because these were some of the first homes built here in Venice.
And I feel very much at home here as well.
Well, very good. So how old were you when you came to Venice?
Well, I turned 8 on the road from California.
Oh.
Driving across the country in my parents' Edsel with my sister in the back seat.
And do you know how your parents made Venice their
decision to
destiny?
come to Florida? Well, I knew you'd ask me that, and I will tell you the honest truth, which I didn't discover until quite a bit later. I'm not sure exactly when it was. But we were told something like, well, you know, we've been to Florida with you to Uncle Otto and Aunt Alita's house, and you see how wonderful things are there, so we've decided that's where we want to live.
And were they in Venice as well?
We bought that, although the fact was that it was my health that caused us to move from Florida. My sister and I were young enough and you know, eager enough for adventure that even though we loved being in California, going to Florida seemed like why not, you know? But we were quite enamored of our place that we had there in Lakeside near San Diego, out in the country, and we were a little mystified perhaps, but we always had complete trust in my parents' decision-making power, so we went with it.
And so when you got here, I guess you went to grade school right away, right?
Yeah, you mean when
here
we got
in Venice?
Here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we did, and the educational system in California focused more on literacy skills as opposed to mathematical skills. So I, in some ways, felt very dumb when I started going to school here, because everybody was a year or two ahead of me in math, and I was, you know, kind of trying to scramble to, you know, to catch up. But, you know, it was a good experience being a young student here.
And where was your school?
Venice Elementary initially,
mm-hmm.
and then on to the junior high school.
Okay.
And from there to Pineview.
Okay.
And the nature of Pineview being that they were culling out students from all the county schools with the supposition that they were, that the word was gifted in some way, sort of made you feel like, well, I better, you know, act gifted.
A little pressure, huh? A little
so
pressure.
I didn't feel that way. I felt like I was, you know, maybe a little smarter than the average bear or something, but I didn't feel particularly gifted. And I felt like I was going to be in there with a bunch of geniuses and bookworms and things, and that didn't prove to be true.
So when you say the word gifted, I look around your lovely home here and I see so many pieces of art that you have created. How did you get interested in art? Well,
I am happy to tell you a little story, which I think would be of interest to people. When I was in junior high school, and this is back when art was a standard part of the curriculum, and we kind of took it for granted. So art and music, you know, and PE and all of the, you know, sort of well-rounded approach to educating and giving kids experience. Now they've, you know, perhaps tailored things a little bit differently, and art and music are the worse off for it. Vital to the development of the full person to be exposed to, not just the academics, but the less academic and more creative departments. So, in junior high school, I was very fortunate enough to be taught by a woman named Virginia Gaskins. And she saw me, of course I'd been encouraged my whole life because I did have this art ability as a gift that I was born with and was happy to pursue. So my parents and other teachers in the past had seen this and encouraged me. But Ms. Gaskins was, I think she just kind of, as somebody who was herself an artist and loved art, gave me the courage, I guess you could say, or the confidence to really feel like, and she planted the seed is what it amounted to. The idea that maybe I was an artist, and not just that I could do art well, but that I was an artist. So what makes it a good story is that later on, who should be my art teacher at Pineview, because they did the same process with the teachers as they did with students, so they used some process to determine which teachers would be most suitable to teach the gifted students, and Ms. Gaskins was among those. So she also became my art teacher at Pineview.
Then did you go to college and study art?
Yes, I did. I went to University of Florida 2 times, and I didn't take the typical path there, which was pretty typical of me, not to take the typical path. And I didn't simply go from undergraduate to graduate school. So I went from 73 to 78 and got my BFA. And then I went off and got some life experience and, found out what the real world was like to some extent. And then decided that perhaps I could benefit from going and getting my master's degree, and that could lead to a teaching job or maybe just, doing my art at a higher level. And so that did happen.
And where did you teach?
That was from 86 to 88.
Where did you teach then?
Well, I taught for a while. I began teaching as a graduate student. Many students who become teachers do. And then the circumstances were such that I was hired by the university to teach afterwards. It's not common because usually they try to stay away from hiring the people that they've just, brought through the system. But there was an illness, and I had to replace kind of an emergency way one of the faculty. So I did that and got involved in a few other things, and in the meantime, my parents' health took turns for the worse. Both of them had, their own sets of problems. So having come down here to be with them in the beginning, I realized that I needed to stay, and so I did. And after some time, and things had gotten stabilized, and we kind of had things figured out how we were going to, all 3 of us function.
I want to go back to your parents, because what year was that they got in the car in San Diego and drove you and your sister to Venice?
That was in 1964.
And what were their names?
Terry, or that's what my dad would rather have me say, but his real name was Emil.
Okay.
And he never did care for that name. And the story there, briefly, is that when he was in the Army, and he was the career Army guy, Lieutenant Colonel Emil Sager, he was sitting around the table one night with his buddies, and I guess there maybe were a couple of Irishmen among them. And they said, "We need to give you an Irish name." And so he was happy to trade names for just about anything. But they said Terry was a good name for him, so it stuck.
And it stuck. Mm-hmm. Okay. And your mom?
Marjorie
Sager.
Yeah.
And if you came to Venice any time in the last 20 years, you would know that name because she was very active in the real estate business.
For sure.
And at that time, Bud Wimmers, who was one of the original people with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers down here, was he's one of the people who stayed after the bust. And I guess he was heavily involved in real estate.
Well, I mean, after the bust and they, I guess, went bankrupt or whatever it was, then he was responsible for conducting that process with the BLE. But I don't know if you're asking me about
By the
Mr.
time,
Rimmer's,
by the
you know,
time you all came,
but he was, as a figure in town, he was central, and a lot in the those days, the specialization was unknown. So it was a place where you would go to get to pay your electric bill and your water bill, and Earl Midland was saying to get his draft card, and I think I might have gotten mine there too. And it was all-purpose, one-stop place.
That was
And
on
of course,
Miami
the real
Avenue?
estate, yeah, 221 West Miami Avenue, and the Florida Power and Light and the whole kit and caboodle.
Right.
It was all all roads led to Mr.
Right.
Rimmer's office, and I was doing some thinking as to why, and there's so many questions I should have asked my mom, and I never did. But why she ended up working for Mr. Wimmers as opposed to someone else. But I know it had a great deal to do with the fact of who he was, how he conducted his business, and that she knew that his operation would always remain pretty much what it was when she became aware of it, and wouldn't be, expanded and morph into some kind of a super real estate place. And she liked that, and I'm sure he was somewhat of a father figure to her also, but they got along great. And they saw things the same way. They were thoroughly honest, and always wanted to put the customer first and that sort of thing, tried and true.
and am I correct that when he passed away, she took over the business?
That's right. Yeah. And eventually my parents built a house. It was on Cadiz Road, really a stone's throw from the beach. And it was a good setup for my dad to practice golf because he could go, we had a vacant lot on either side of us, so we can go to the one vacant lot and hit the golf ball across our property to the other vacant lot. And, there was
Perfect,
lots of room to
right?
do that. Yeah. And all you had to do was kind of climb the hill and you could see the beach. So we were close.
And I bet you went to the beach frequently.
We did. I would say a certain period of my time, of my life here, fishing was my primary focus. And it was kind of all about fishing for a while, and I lived to fish.
So did you come home from school and get your fishing rod and
Almost.
go
Of
over
course,
to the
we had,
beach? Or
I have to just say about my parents that they were terrific parents, and they were a great married couple and a great example to my sister and I. But one thing was that we lived in a fairly disciplined, not extremely, and not inhibitively.
Your dad being a lieutenant colonel.
Disciplined environment, and that was very good. I mean, not maybe all children would thrive in those circumstances, but we did. In structure and just dependability, and mixed with overlaid with love. And so I'll forever be grateful to my parents for establishing that kind of an environment for us. But we had to do our homework first before we went off doing other kid stuff. But a couple things were crossing my mind because obviously I knew we'd be talking. But I wanted to say that Venice, when we came here, and I was that age, the fishing age, was the kind of town where, well, for one thing, Venice Avenue, which has now got that sculpted kind of golf coursey walkway, and it's nice. I mean, I
Right.
run on it all the time.
Wasn't like that then.
It wasn't like that. It was flat. There were palm trees on either side, and they kept it mowed, and that was about it. So there was a lot of clear space in there, and you could go down on any Saturday or Sunday, and there'd be guys playing football. So you just go over there, and it was come one, come all, and friendly, well, mostly friendly competition. Same thing with vacant lots, wherever they may be. You could. That wasn't, Venice Avenue wasn't where you'd want to play baseball. So we get a vacant lot that would have maybe like a tree screen and stuff, and we wouldn't be knocking the ball into the traffic and stuff. So, sandlot baseball, and it was just, my parents turned us loose. There was always stuff going on for us to do. We didn't want for activities, and it was a wholesome, healthy place for, in that era. It was a little arrested in time to some degree. Venice was almost the fact, just like it's an island, it was kind of cut off from the evolution of society, the rest of society. Looking back, it seems that it was, it clung more closely to the old ways, the old values than surrounding areas, particularly, Sarasota or something like that. Yeah.
Everybody knew each other here, probably.
They did, we knew our neighbors, and it was a strong sense of community. Something that's happened during the time, that did happen during the time I was growing up, was the advent of the condominiums and the developments. And those two things, I think, characterize the major shift here in Venice from what it used to be to what it is now. Although it still preserved a lot of the feeling, and certain areas like the one I happen to live in, feel very much like a neighborhood. But with the influx of people coming into the condos and the developments, there's a separation or estrangement to some degree, and those people may be very involved in the community or something, but you don't feel connected to them the way it used to. And when you're younger, you feel you're more myopic, but it seemed like everybody knew everybody in Venice. And there were just a couple of churches, and we went to one of the big churches, and there was that community as well. And so you just felt embraced by this town. Right. In a way that I'm not sure that's available as much to kids nowadays.
Probably not anywhere.
Well, if you're going to find it, it would be in a place like this, because that's why I say Venice has managed to maintain a lot of that, I think. But things change. This is a painting done by one who lived just up the street here. Her name was Anne Hardenberg. She was the sister of Tyrone Power, who was a famous movie star.
Oh my goodness!
And Anne was, as you can see, quite a painter and a great lady. And we always, she always was very welcoming to me to come over and just hang out with her and talk about art and stuff. So this is a painting of hers that hung in my mom's office for many years. But what it is, older folks, long-time residents would recognize this as the original jetty. And it's the same, most of the same rocks are still there, but these forms with the concrete poured in them, well, they're there as well, but you can't see them anymore, because long about, I don't know, somewhere in the mid-70s, they came in with the asphalt and they just poured it, because these were breaking down and they were somewhat hazardous, starting to rust, and those were narrow walkways. Right. So I was going to say, we used to ride our spider bikes. The challenge was to see if you could go top speed from one end of the jetty to the other and not, meet your fatal end on the rocks. And nobody was ever hurt doing that. Wow. And nobody was ever hurt playing touch football on Venice Avenue either, that I knew about.
So you and Johnny was your buddy.
John McPherson. He was I don't know if I'm sort of reluctant to use the term best friend, but certainly he was one of my best friends. In the old days, we were able to ride down on our bikes to the jetty, and once we got to Tarpon Center Road, it was all dirt road and was not paved. And our view was not obstructed in any way by condominiums. So there were some scattered cottages. I know the Sandbar Beach Hotel was there, but that's back on the Esplanade. And but it was just kind of this somewhat like Casperson's is now, just natural Florida beach along there with, like I say, a few cottages, that were, I'm not sure, what their status was, but I'm sure that there were some old timers living there. And when you got out to the jetty, what you would find is kind of comparable to in Nokomis, where they had the fish camp, little building there that serves, and that's been, updated. But back then, Johnny Walker, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him. Yeah, Captain Johnny Walker and Vera, his wife, had their little fish house there, and I'm pretty sure it must have been block, and it was pretty darn small, but they actually lived in the back of this place.
Oh my goodness! So what is in the place where that house?
Oh, that's where the hot dog stand is.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that just
so for a
is
long time there was
amazing.
nothing, and I don't know about the legalities or the politics or whatever that were involved. And I think maybe it might have been to some extent that they just reached the end of their interest in doing something like that. They got older, and maybe it was a little too much.
Well, I believe I remember that he wrote a column for the Gondolier about fishing years ago.
Okay, that's certainly possible. I know what he did do was open up a little shop, like an import shop in the Venice Center Mall. So he did that for a while just to stay active. But I think he was, tired of running a little
Fishing shack.
men's club there.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like that. John and I were obviously very young, and we weren't catered to in any way by the old timers there. They kind of ignored us, which was good because they just acted as if we weren't there, and so we got to get the feeling of what it was like to be around them, and they behaved normally, or they didn't alter their behavior because of us. But they had a little grill in there and a kind of a L-shaped arrangement with a table countertop. And they sold, of course, a lot of fishing gear, so if you were on the jetty and you were fishing, come in there, and if you needed something, you could buy it. And if you were hungry, Vera would throw something on the grill and fry it up for you. Nothing fancy, no salads or anything like that, just, fisherman food. And another thing I need to tell you about Johnny Walker is that John and I made a little money on the side. We actually had our first business together, J&J Lawns. So his parents had the riding mower and I had the push mower, so the two of us did our lawns together. And we also would go fishing for pinfish specifically, which are inedible small fish, or inedible to humans, but snook love them. Oh. So we would go with our buckets and we would spend an hour catching as many pinfish as we could, and then we'd hustle down on our bikes to Johnny Walker's Fish Camp and sell them to Johnny.
Brilliant.
5 cent, 10 cent, and 15 cent pinfish.
So you guys were pretty wealthy.
Not exactly. We're about as wealthy as we needed to be. Because we had, we just kind of kept the comic books flowing. That was the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell me what else you and Johnny did when you were young for adventure and excitement. Did you? I guess in high school there must have been bonfires on the beach.
Well, later on, yes, that did happen. It was, I would say, tolerated by the police force. We would have, it was usually a Friday night thing later on down there at Casperson. So our interests had changed somewhat. We didn't bring our fishing poles down there. But so that happened as well. We. Like I said, just the casual sports and the fishing and the swimming. We had, speaking of John, he and I both had saltwater aquariums, which we kept up, and we would take our seine net, and I don't know if you know what a seine net is.
Right,
to two poles and the net stretched between floats on top, sinkers on the bottom, and one person would walk out and you'd make a loop and come back, and whatever you got, you got. And most of the time it was little stuff, and we do it just to get shiners for bait. But once in a while you actually get a real fish in there. It's kind of a surprise. Like by the disciples by the Sea of Galilee or something with their nets. So we get a flounder or a redfish or something once in a while. But mostly we used the seine net for bait, but also we get fish to put in our aquarium. And you kind of had to do that a lot because saltwater aquariums are difficult to keep up.
Right.
So the mortality rate was pretty high there in our aquariums.
Yeah.
As I said, this was just an idyllic place to grow up. And looking back, I remember having the thought many times as I would leave and go off to school and come back, I was happy to have my freedom, so to speak, and part of me just wanted to get the heck out of here, because it felt very provincial to me as I became older. And looking back, though, I see that was something that I should have valued more, but that would have been asking a lot for somebody who was, 15, 16, 17 years old. But coming back as I matured, I would begin to notice changes. And but it was so gradual that there'd be a small change here, a small change there, but they accumulated. And over the years now, Venice has become somewhat unrecognizable from what it used to be. Something that just sprang to mind: at the end of Venice Avenue, where it intersects 41, there used to be a neon sign, a vertical neon sign that said Venice directly on the Gulf, or maybe Venice directly on the Gulf, or something like that. So it was forever burning out, and there must have been one circuit for the VEN and another circuit for the ICE, because you'd see it on a regular basis, like once a winter season in the gondolier, they'd have the photograph, ice directly on the Gulf. So it was good for a laugh. But so the neon sign, was kind of one of those things that, you enjoy it and you never think it's going to go away, but then one day they decide to replace it with whatever's there now. Welcome to historic Venice, or whatever it says.
That's a great story. I never really heard that before, and that's really, every time
I thought about it until...
every time I do one of these interviews, I hear something new. Well, I want to thank you for being on Venice Views today. It's been a pleasure listening to all your stories, and it's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I hope we'll meet again when we bring you more Venice Views.